I came home on a Thursday evening in late September with the smell of antiseptic still clinging to my hair and that dull, steady ache behind my knees that only shows up after too many hours on a hospital floor. I had stayed longer than I was supposed to. Someone called out. Someone else needed coverage. By the time I pulled into my driveway in Naperville, the sky had already turned that flat grey blue it settles into just before dark. The porch light was on. The house looked exactly as it always had. Brick front, white trim, the flower bed by the steps needing more care than I'd given it lately. Nothing about it suggested anything had changed. Inside, it was quiet in the way I expected. I set my tote by the door, already thinking about a glass of water, maybe sitting down for a moment before speaking to anyone. Then I stepped into the kitchen and stopped. There was a second refrigerator. Stainless steel, narrow, too new to belong there. It stood beside mine as if it had always been part of the room, but it hadn't. For a second, I honestly wondered if I'd forgotten something if Ryan had mentioned it and I hadn't heard him. Then Alyssa walked in. She had a marker in her hand and a stack of small yellow labels. She glanced at me, then toward the refrigerator, and said, "That one's mine. From now on, buy your own food." She said it lightly, almost casually. I remember pausing there, trying to understand what I had just heard. "What do you mean, buy my own food?" I asked. She shrugged, like the explanation was obvious. "It's easier this way. No confusion. Margaret." She said my name like we were sharing a lease, not a life. I opened my refrigerator. The air shifted in a way I can still feel now. Yogurt, eggs, butter, fruit, leftovers, everything had a label. Her name written in thick black marker across things I had purchased just days earlier. Even the half and half. Ryan stood in the hallway behind her, one shoulder against the wall, arms folded, watching. "Mom, don't make this a thing," he said. "We're just organizing." Organizing? That was the word he chose. I remember looking down at my shoes, cracked white leather from years of use, and thinking how strange it was that I had spent the entire day making decisions that mattered. And now I was standing, in my own kitchen, being told how to use my own groceries. I nodded. I didn't argue. Some people mistake silence for permission. At the time, I didn't say that out loud, but the thought settled in quietly. I reached for a box of tea and noticed the label on it too. That's when the room went quiet in a way I could feel more than hear. I set the kettle down. I went upstairs, closed my bedroom door, and sat on the edge of the bed without even taking off my coat. The house carried on beneath me, cabinet doors, a soft laugh, the low hum of that second refrigerator. I sat there long enough for the light outside to fade. And somewhere in that hour, I made a decision I didn't fully understand yet. I wouldn't react. I would understand. That choice mattered more than I realized at the time. The next morning, the labels had spread. Bathroom cabinet, pantry shelves, laundry detergent, paper towels in the mudroom. It would have been absurd if it hadn't been so deliberate. I stood brushing my teeth, staring at a label stuck to the hand soap I had bought the week before, and a memory surfaced without warning. Ryan was 8. It was February. Snow packed against the windows. The radiator knocking through the night. I was buttoning his coat over his pajamas while he wheezed against my shoulder. "Mama, am I going to stay at the hospital?" he asked. "Just until they help you breathe better," I told him. He nodded into my neck. "Okay, you stay too." I did stay, all night. That memory passed as quickly as it came. Then my phone buzzed, and I was back in the present, standing in my own bathroom, looking at someone else's name on my soap. Later that day, I came home early and found Alyssa cooking. Pot roast. She was using the Dutch oven I had bought years earlier. The kitchen smelled warm onions, rosemary, slow-cooked meat. It should have felt comforting. It didn't. She didn't ask if I wanted any. Ryan came in, poured iced tea into one of my glasses, and sat down without looking at me. I asked, "How long do you plan to stay here without contributing?" He didn't answer right away. "We help," he said finally. "With what?" Alyssa set the spoon down a little harder than necessary. "We're trying to get ahead, Margaret. That takes time." Get ahead. That phrase stayed with me. Because later, I realized they weren't trying to get ahead. They were trying to get control. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 1 in the morning, I went downstairs for water. The microwave read 17. The house was still, but not peaceful. That's when I noticed the brochure, tucked halfway under the fruit bowl. I almost didn't pick it up. It was for a senior living community. Soft colors, smiling faces, monthly pricing circled in blue ink. At the time, I didn't react. I just carried it upstairs and placed it on my dresser. Then I sat in the dark a while longer, and another memory surfaced. Ryan at 12. The summer after his father died, I was packing sandwiches before a shift. "When I get big," he said, "you won't have to work this much." I smiled at him. "That's sweet, honey. I mean it. I remember the smell of coffee, cheap lunch meat, morning light on the floor, little things." By the weekend, the labels had become normal to them. That was the part that stayed with me. Humiliation settles quickly for the people causing it. Saturday morning, Ryan asked about my long-term plans for the house. He said it casually, like it was a practical discussion. I asked him what he meant. He said, "This place is a lot for one person. It might make sense to downsize, eventually." I remember thinking then, this wasn't a suggestion. It was positioning. That afternoon, I checked my filing cabinet. The documents were there, but not quite the way I had left them. Papers slightly out of order. A crease where there hadn't been one before. I didn't say anything. I took a photo. Then I stopped. That evening, Alyssa asked if she could start using the good dishes for guests. Guests. I said no. She smiled in that way that never quite reached her eyes. "You don't have to be territorial." That's when something settled into place for me. This wasn't misunderstanding. It was strategy. On Monday, I called an attorney. Not for confrontation, for clarity. His office was in Oak Brook. Quiet, orderly. The kind of place where everything had a place and stayed there. He listened without interrupting. Then he asked simple questions. Ownership, rent, lease, contributions. I answered. He turned his screen slightly toward me. The paperwork already had my name on it. I realized that before he even spoke. "They are occupants by permission," he said calmly, "not by right." Then he paused. That pause mattered. Because in that moment, everything became procedural. When I got home that evening, Alyssa's parents were sitting in my living room. I hadn't been told. They spoke carefully. Concerned tones, words like space, privacy, what's best. Then came the suggestion, a community, a better fit for this stage of life. It was phrased gently, but the outcome wasn't mine. I said very little, just enough to let them keep talking. My phone stayed in my pocket, recording. Later, Ryan said, "Nobody's trying to hurt you." That sentence stayed with me longer than the rest. Within the week, everything shifted. Financial records, property verification, formal notice. At the same time, neighbors started noticing. "Mrs." Donnelly said, "Some of us know who owns that house." That mattered. Ryan tried to talk me out of it. Alyssa escalated. I stayed calm. "You can't take what was never yours," I told her. That line stayed in the room after I said it. The notice was served the next morning. Everything changed after that. Performance turned to panic. Then argument. Then pleading. But procedure doesn't bend. It simply moves forward. In the weeks that followed, things separated into two tracks. Paperwork moved steadily, and socially, the story shifted. Calls came, then stopped. Messages appeared, then disappeared. And slowly, Ryan began to change. Less defensive, more uncertain. The night he knocked on my door, I almost didn't answer. He stood there, shoulders heavy. "Did you really think I'd let anything happen to you?" he asked. I looked at him. "I think you already were," he cried quietly. That was the first moment I saw something shift. Alyssa left before the deadline. Ryan stayed a few days longer. Then he left too. Not forced, not removed. He chose to go. A month later, we met for lunch. He had a job, he was trying. "I didn't understand the difference between being helped and being carried," he said. I didn't respond right away. Some realizations don't need immediate answers. 6 months later, the house is quiet again. Not empty, just settled. The second refrigerator is gone, the labels are gone. Ryan visits sometimes. He knocks now, he asks. Small things. They matter more than people think. A few weeks ago, I found one last label under a pantry shelf. I peeled it off slowly. Some people mistake silence for permission, but silence can also be preparation. It can be the moment a person decides not to disappear. If stories about quiet boundaries resonate with you, you're welcome to stay. These days, when I walk through my front door after work, nothing in this house asks me to prove I belong here. And that is enough.